Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Divorcing Strong podcast. I'm Becky Sampson, your host today. And I'm actually really excited about this episode this time because we're going to be talking to a gentleman who's has a lot of experience in being in the family law and divorce space as an attorney. So Russell Knight is a family law attorney with offices in Chicago, Illinois, and Naples, Florida. For 18 years, Russell Knight and his team have been providing excellent service to people in their most challenging hours. And, as I was doing the prep for this show, I went and looked at his website. And one of the things that really impressed me is that he is very thorough and has the interest of the kids at first. And I think sometimes that gets lost in the divorce because whether you're working with an attorney or not, I think the kids kind of get on the back burner. So I'm anxious to kind of hear how he does that and how to navigate the divorce when it comes to the legal system. So welcome to the show, Russell.
Thanks for having me.
Hi. Well, and I have to say you're quite daring because I've never even met you before and you just responded on LinkedIn. So I appreciate you taking the time today to share your wisdom and insight with people who are going through divorce.
I'd be happy to. I do it every day.
I know. Well, now you get to go on the bigger scale doing these podcasts because you do it all the time, right? Mm-hmm. So, well, kind of tell us what got you into being a lawyer, first of all, and then also kind of what got you into doing divorce, because this is not a space that not a lot of people think that they'll do. So kind of tell us the backstory of that.
Well, I graduated from undergrad and I had a computer science degree of some sorts. And then I was a computer programmer and I was not very good and I was not into it. It just wasn't interesting enough. There was no people factor. Mm-hmm. And so I just didn't have any sort of interest in that. And I said, I have to get into something where I'm dealing with people. And so then I thought I like thinking logically and taking steps on everything. So I went to law school. Mm-hmm. And then I graduated from law school right when the Great Recession was starting. And I worked for a guy in a little wood paneled office on the west side of Chicago with bars on the windows. Really? And he gave me the divorce cases. And I was not a beggar that could be a chooser. So I did the divorces and I kind of liked them. And then I kept doing more.
What did you like about them?
You are crafting, for the most part, an agreement between two people who don't like each other. This is not a real estate transaction where one person's excited to sell and one person's excited to buy.
Right.
This is two people that do not like each other, and you have to figure out what's fair and how do we get that closer and closer, and also explain this is what would happen, God forbid, if you went to trial. So it's basically like a Mission Impossible episode. If you can't get the contract together, boom, you go to trial, and then nobody's happy. But sometimes you got to be ready for it because if you can't bring a knife to a gunfight. I'll tell you what.
Well, I do have to say, when I watched your video and it seems like you like the challenge, right, of crafting. I like that you use that word crafting because it really is. It's crafting an agreement where two people are adversarial towards each other. And how do we make it work for for both parts and the kids? And it seems like you like that challenge, yeah?
It's very challenging. And yes, I do like it.
Yeah. So you just went right into divorce and then stayed there. Have you ever done any kind of other law
when I worked for a guy in the wood paneled office, he did criminal stuff. We did immigration. I speak Spanish fluently. We did bankruptcies. It was everything, anything that walked in the door. And so because I did the stuff he didn't want to do, which was specifically divorce and so it helps to know a little something about everything, but sooner or later you have to choose a focus. And I chose divorce.
What do you think is the most challenging thing about what you do?
But what I do, it's the trial work, because the subject matter is so incredibly broad. A divorce lawyer might have to know how to interview a child psychiatrist one day, or for the same case, and then the next day at trial have to rebut what a business valuator has estimated that the value of a family business is. And both those things have nothing to do with each other whatsoever. And you're only allowed to present those details through the rules of evidence, which are very specific. And I like to say it's like giving, it's not like a homework project where you hand in a piece of paper and the judge is your teacher and says A+.
Right.
It's like giving a presentation, but the other kids are allowed to yell at you during the presentation. They're allowed to object. They actively want you to fail. So it's extremely challenging to spin all those plates and also present your client's best case at the same time. So that's what I really like is trials and presenting stuff.
Yeah, well, and so going to before we started this thing, I was telling Russell that I have this company called Only Subpoenas. So I do subpoenas for divorce attorneys. I do them for all attorneys, but mainly divorce attorneys because, in divorce there are people that try to hide things. They try to do stuff. But how do you use subpoenas in your line of work?
We have to use subpoenas almost constantly because either our clients aren't sufficiently organized or kept records, so we have to ask the party, or we don't trust the documents that are being produced by the other party. Especially now with AI, you can just make the documents up if you want.
That's true. That is so. You said that people are doing that a lot, yeah?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It doesn't. Before you'd have to be a graphic designer to do it. Now you don't. You put it into something and put in your taxes, and you simply type in your prompt. Change my income from 150,000 to 50,000. It will produce the exact document with 50,000. It looks the exact same.
So you're using subpoenas to come up and to find the real data for that.
That's correct. Yeah. And so you have to, because once you get even an inkling that one thing isn't right, then you have to subpoena everything.
I always say subpoenas win cases. That's how it was for me, at least, is having all the facts on the table. So let me ask you, when people come to, obviously you do consultations for people. If people are listening to this, what recommendations do you have for them to prepare in order to do a consultation with you? Or if you're actually going to retain you, what information are you wanting them to provide? And what questions should they ask?
I think that you shouldn't need to be super prepared, to be honest, because the lawyer should be a professional and should know what to ask you. You should have a series of questions that come naturally. Like, how long have you been married? Do you have kids? Did you buy a house during the marriage? Is there a big difference in the incomes? There's going to be about a dozen questions that are going to cover 90% of your life as a married person. You don't need to anticipate that. And if you think you're going to tell the professional you might be hiring some sort of interesting fact, that's great, but leave that for the end. Say, by the way, he also owns an island in the Bahamas. That's great, but to lead with that is kind of silly. I would focus on making sure that you have the gut feeling that this lawyer is your guy, because you wouldn't be interviewing them if you knew they weren't qualified. So you already know they're qualified. The question is, are they going to be the right person for you? And then their questions are trying to figure out, are you the right person for them? So let them ask their questions. Don't think you have to bring a million things forward, because if your lawyer's not asking the right questions, you're going to know it. You're going to say, like, shouldn't he have asked me about that island I have in Bermuda? Put it on my financial statement.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that people, one of the things I say all the time, Russell, is that don't marry the first divorce attorney you meet, because I say that cheeky, right? Because we really think, oh, you divorced, and so, or you did my friend's divorce, and so you should do my divorce. And so you brought up a really good point, is that you're interviewing that attorney, and the attorney is really interviewing you too, because they also, you've dealt with difficult people and you don't want a difficult situation. You want to be able to really make a difference. And if you don't have someone that's willing to work with you, then it makes it very difficult.
I would be very wary of the lawyer that is really excited to work with you right away.
This sounds like dating.
Yeah, exactly. You want somebody who wants to do things for the right reason, and that's to get you through to your next chapter of your life, not because their office rent's due.
Right. And they're hungry. I used to do real estate, actually. And I'd always say to people, you can tell, your client will tell if you need the commission. Right. And so I think it is important to do that interviewing. So what are the tips and trades that you, what would you recommend for people to really be hyper alert to when they're starting the process or even thinking about the process of divorce?
Well, I would try to get a good grasp of what your finances are, what you believe they are.
Yeah.
Because your spouse is going to tell you what they believe your finances are as well.
Yes.
If you're really far apart, you better have some answers. So screenshots of any accounts, photos of things that you have in the house. making sure that your texts haven't been deleted, that your emails are still all there. You don't know what you might need, but you don't need to worry about it for right now. I just trashed AI, but actually AI is the most wonderful way to search for something. Think about, you go on Gmail, you look at that little star, you click on it and say, show me an email where my husband said X, and it will go through 20 years of Gmails and it will find it.
On Google?
Yeah, Gmail, yeah. There's
No
a little star,
way.
you see it.
So you put star and then you just think, so if you're doing some searching to trying to find some evidence, is that what you're saying?
You ask it, like, show me an email where my husband or my wife discussed this. Because you might be like, when did that happen? Like probably in 2007 or something.
Yeah.
And it will find it.
That's crazy. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one thing I learned during my experience is I had to be a master at documenting and I had to be a master researcher, because like you said, the courts work on evidence, not just by hearsay or what you say, he says, and one of the other things that kind of surprised me too is when I was doing my financials at the very beginning, I said, yeah, but he's got this. She goes, don't worry about that. He's going to do his own financials. So talk a little bit about how hard is it sometimes to keep people out of each other's business while they're going through a divorce?
Well, they're definitely in each other's business for sure.
Yeah.
And there should be enough history, just like in old emails and old texts, where you should be able to find everything that you need, where you don't need to be worried about the current thing. Which, for the current financial situations, they're supposed to provide a financial affidavit.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it's the same thing in every state. I'm licensed in Illinois and Florida. And then you use the financial affidavit as a basis where you issue a notice to produce, where there's a list of 120 things. You'd have to have a very weird lifestyle to not have your assets be one of those 120 things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you do interrogatories, which are broad questions about your financial situation that require a narrative answer. And that should uncover 99% of what you need to know. And in my experience, unless the person is working for cash and spends only on cash, on services, things that can't be traced, you're going to find everything. And
so what happens if someone's not willing to fill that out?
They're going to get defaulted because it's required. So if they don't fill out the basic financial affidavit or answer a notice to produce, they can, in Illinois, we call it a 219, where we say, listen, if you don't cooperate with the system's not going to cooperate with you. And that means you don't get to sit on a stand and talk about what you own or don't own. We're just going to let you sit in the corner over there, and we're going to talk about what we do know. We do know that you didn't fill out a financial affidavit. We do know you didn't answer the notice to produce. And we do know that you had all these assets because you texted us about them, you emailed us about them, and those things aren't hearsay. If it's a statement of a party opponent, it automatically comes into evidence. That's it.
Well, and that's a frustration that I think a lot of people feel. I mean, at least when they come to me, they're just like, well, I don't even know where to begin. Like, where I know he has other accounts, but I don't know where they are. I don't know how much is in there. I have never been privy to it. They don't even know. And then while they're going to court, he's not disclosing it. So they don't know what to do.
Well, if there are accounts of any kind, they will be earning some kind of interest. And then they will be on a 1040. And if they have accounts in other names, the whole tax system is set up exactly for this situation where the government wants to know what money. They don't care about what you own. They care about what you're earning.
Right.
And money makes money. So unless it's all gold bars or unless it's a stack of cash in a safe, you're going to be putting it on your taxes because the bank or the institution that you're saving at,
they're reporting it.
Yeah. Even the foreign institutions. So this concept of a Swiss bank account, that went away. In 2015, the United States government said, we're not doing this anymore. I don't care. The Bahamas, the Cayman Islands, the Swiss banks, you have to send us documents about any American citizen that has a deposit in your country. So the era of hidden money is gone. But the era of hidden money has now been replaced by cryptocurrency because they definitely don't keep track of that.
Yeah. That is the new challenge, right? That people are having. But I also, one of my little catchphrases is that just because they're trying to hide the asset doesn't mean that it's actually hidden, right?
That's
so there's always a trail that way. Talk a little bit about how does somebody navigate the division of assets and how important is it for them to actually research their rights?
Well, they're typically most states' regime says that your rights are to any asset that's been earned during the marriage. It's considered marital, or
Mm-hmm.
assets that have been mixed up that might have been from before, but like, your grandma gave you $100,000, then you ended up putting in a joint account, then you ended up buying a house with it. It's probably mixed up and being marital now. And then everything. Right. But does that mean it gets divided 50-50? Not necessarily. That's not the default in Illinois. In Florida, it is the default. And so you usually start with an Excel spreadsheet in Florida, but in Illinois, you start with a more conceptual list. Like, I would prefer to have, my grandma's china and the house on Main Street, and then you can keep the lake house and the Ferrari. And and then we figure out, well, what are all those worth? Are we approximately close to 50-50? That's what you do in Illinois. It's more feeling it through. And then in Florida, you make a straight spreadsheet and then say, okay, this was all worth this. Therefore, you owe me $2,024.32 to balance it out. So
when you're dealing with people though, most people are going through divorce, as you, I'm sure you experience this. I mean, we don't go to divorce school, right? So we don't know what we don't know. Where do you recommend people go to really learn to learn their rights? Or is that something that you usually go through when you're working with somebody, is going, okay, this is what your rights, you take the analyze their situation and then say, okay, this is what you can do and this is what you can't do. How do they learn that?
For my particular websites, especially for my Illinois website,
right, yeah,
I have 750 articles about everything. And then I hired some guys to make a chatbot where you can literally put in your problem. It won't search random stuff on the internet. It will only search my 750 articles, and will give you an answer that will refer you back to an article. So whatever you want to know about, it will tell you. So that's how most people find me, to be
okay.
frank.
And I love that. I do remember seeing that you do that. And I was like, okay, that is perfect, because a lot of the big complaint that I hear is that, oh, my lawyer didn't tell me this, and and that sort of thing. And so do you feel like it's an advantage when you're working with somebody, the more educated they are on the system and what they need to know and what they don't need to know?
Yes. And I would say especially that it's funny thing about lawyers is it's not like that there's like plumbers where there's institutional knowledge about like how pipes and toilets work. For lawyers, like, you can look it up. Like, these laws are written down. These cases are written down. Anything a lawyer tells you, you should be able to verify that. So, and you should be able to verify it easily too. And looking for original sources, because there's statutes or there's rules or there's case law that should say exactly that.
So explain to people what that is. What's a statute? What's a case law? I mean, if they may not even have any clue what that means.
The legislature of whatever state you're in has a body of work that governs every divorce. It's usually anywhere from like 15 to 40 pages. It doesn't take you forever and forever to read it. And then there's sort of rules in between the rules, like, well, what if this happens and that happens? And we're familiar with what happens in the Supreme Court. Well, courts will look at the rules, apply them to other rules, and then we'll issue a decision based on the facts. And that decision will have rules inside of it. That rules will be called case law. So let's think about something like that 50-50 division is not always required, it'll say.
Right.
So just to remind you, so you'll be like, okay, well, if the Supreme Court of Illinois or Florida says that, then I could probably expect that for my own case. And then finally, there's usually a set of rules that the court system itself makes to govern the procedures, which are called Supreme Court rules or civil procedure rules in Florida, that govern how things happen. So like, well, why are we here in front of this judge today? Well, Supreme Court rule 405 says we can't bring in mediation information. So then we're going to talk to the judge about what we think, how our mediation went without revealing too much. There's so many rules, and it takes conservatively 5 to 10 years to really internalize them.
Right.
Like, you don't want to go spend 5 to 10 years on doing nothing but on divorce. So you got to trust a professional who has done that. But I strongly encourage you to double check what they're saying. People call me every day for a second opinion. And you know what they tell me? Why didn't my lawyer tell me that?
I get the same thing, to be honest with you, Russell, is like when I tell them my experience and what I learned, because I knew nothing about the court system when I first started my second divorce. Like, I had no clue. And I did so much research, and I, one step at a time, and different people that I was talking to and things like that. But I educated, and then they're like, gosh, I wish I would have known that. I mean, I hear that more often than not. And that's really what's driving me to do the Divorcing Strong. And I love that you are educational base, and it allows you to be able to come more knowledgeably in working with an attorney, because you'll know what to ask, and you'll be like, okay, this is a decision I can make because I know my rights and the boundaries. That's really what you're saying, I think, is that the statutes, you guys are driven. I mean, I would say attorneys, you are, what do you say, governed by the certain laws or the boundaries within the courts. And if you don't know that, then you may not know what your right is. So
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I love that you provide that. Now, what's your website so people can go to it if they...
My Illinois website is rdklegal.com, like Russell Dale Knight, and legal.com. And my Florida website is Naples Divorce Attorney. It's Divorce Attorney, naplesfl.com.
Okay. So if anybody missed that, it's going to be down in the show notes so that they can go there. So I love that's, what other advice would you give somebody that what have you seen has caused people to be successful during the divorce, and also, not be so successful in the divorce? What makes the difference?
I like to call it, is the juice worth the squeeze?
Yeah.
So you might say, like, well, I'm positive that he has an old car that he keeps in his dad's garage out in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, what kind of car is it? Like, are we talking about an Alfa Romeo Spider, or are we talking about an old Ford? And if it's not worth looking into, let's not look into it. Like, some things just aren't worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Or a lot of people, the same thing, even with a schedule for a child. Like, is Halloween that important to you? I mean, come on. That's sort of the things where I'm like, it's not worth fighting over. And the beauty of it is, once your entire divorce is done, and if there's one thing that is undone, except for property division, but everything else, you can reopen it. And you can focus on that one thing that bothered you afterwards. And it's a lot cheaper to finish the whole divorce and then focus on the one thing that was bugging you afterwards.
Okay, so people do not know that.
Yeah.
People don't know that you can reopen your divorce case if there's things that still need to be negotiated. Like, talk a little bit about that, because I actually had a girlfriend of mine call me many years ago when I was going through mine, and I called my attorney and I was like, is that right? You can actually open up your divorce case again? Now, I'm not recommending people do that, okay? But that is a possibility. Like,
yes.
In what cases would they do that for?
Any case with alimony can be readjusted and modified. Any case with child support can be readjusted and modified, ongoing, not in the past. Any case with parenting time or parenting decision-making can get readjusted and modified, obviously, if things change. And typically, you can't readjust or modify a division of assets,
right,
unless they didn't disclose it. So let's go back to my example of the car in the garage somewhere. It didn't get disclosed. And then suddenly you see him driving around with it. You take a picture of him. You can go right back to court and say, you know what? He didn't declare this. So I want to do two things. I want to divide that car, number one. And number two, I want him to pay all my attorney's fees because he didn't disclose that car in the first place.
Okay. Okay. Stop. That's like, people don't understand that they can do that. And again, I'm not an attorney, so I can't say that. However, you just said something that a lot of people after the fact go, oh, like my girlfriend, she found out he had $1 million that he had not even disclosed at all during the divorce. And I was like, that you could reopen that, and go back to the court and say, hey, that wasn't taken care of, and I'm entitled to that. Now you also, that's a decision whether you want to go back there and pay all the money and fight for it and, all of that kind of stuff. But that is a right that somebody has to do, which is crazy. And it happens all the time, don't you think? Or no? You think that people
I think
mostly...
it happens all the time. I am often, I would say about 50% of my cases, I get hired to take over for somebody else or after the divorce.
Yeah.
It's rare for me to start from scratch. I pick up where other people left off and made big, bad mistakes. And I try to fix that.
Now, there's a statute of limitation on that, isn't there?
There is. It's usually 2 years.
Okay. So 2 years after your divorce is final with those assets.
After you found out about the secret asset.
Yeah. Oh,
so
2 years
from the secret. And then you have to allege that it was fraud. And then if it's fraud, it can be even further than 2 years. So if you were if you can, and of course it's always fraud, because if he was supposed to turn it over,
Yep. Yep.
and and he did not, and if you ask specifically about it, then and he doesn't turn it over, it's fraud, and then it could go back in time forever. But it's just
Right.
It ends up being more difficult to prove because people don't usually keep the assets that they had just not disclosed. Usually.
Well, and certainly what's so interesting is they do flaunt it. And you're like, excuse me, we just finished court and you now are flaunting all of this money and saying that you didn't have any before we finished. So I think that's a really important point to let people know that, yes, you can reopen that. There was another question I was going to ask you about that is when people are doing, so you get a court order, right? So you end up getting divorced, you have your divorce decree. And if they don't comply to that, what rights do they have? I mean, what can they do about that?
At any time, you have the right to enforce your decree.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's certain things they're doing that are, I guess, flaunting the law at the same time, where it's beyond just like, well, I'm going to give you that Ford car in one of these days.
Right.
If they're actively saying like, I'm never going to give it to you. And matter of fact, I sold it and I burned it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes contempt of court because you're directly insulting the power of the court. And the court has severe penalties available to it for contempt, to the point where they can say, you better, if you don't turn over that car, then you're gonna have to find a new car or the same value of the car. Otherwise, I'm gonna lock you up and we're gonna leave you in there until you figure it out. And that is that happens so frequently because people think it's a divorce court. What's the worst that could happen? They could divorce me twice.
Right.
They can. The reason why there's that bailiff in there, that officer,
Mm-hmm.
is there in case you act up. So you can, and what's behind the judge is a jail.
Yeah, which is really interesting because I was in a different case in the court, and this guy was acting up in their divorce case, and he ended up back in jail, or he ended up in jail for I think a couple of weeks because of contempt in court. But how often does that really happen, though? I mean, I'm being honest.
All the time.
It does.
Yeah, I'll tell an opposing party, or I'll tell the other attorney, I'm like, hey, next time your client's here, tell him to wear shoes without shoelaces. And don't bother wearing a belt. And brush his teeth. And he can bring a toothbrush too, though.
Well, and I also tell people too that unless you let the court know that that they're not compliant, they're not going to know, right? They're not going to know that to enforce that, to do the compel.
It's
so
true.
That's important to work with an attorney.
Yeah, that's what the troubling thing is that people think judges have 1,500 cases typically.
No, yeah.
And so you show up and you're like, well, I hope the judge has reviewed my case. That has not happened. The judges do a very good job of trying to connect the dots, but if you don't give them the dots, they're not going to do anything for you.
Mm-hmm. You don't get what you don't ask for either.
Yeah,
that's one of the things I know when I worked with my attorney is that he was just like, Becky, what is it? Let's ask for, this or whatever. And I was always for the fair and equitable division. That was always my purpose. And even when I work with people now, I want them to say, look, don't go for the jugular because it's very easy to do that. And that always happens. But fair and equitable, you need to know what your right is. And then you can, as long as you know what your rights are, then you can know what you want to negotiate. You don't have to, you don't know this, but my husband now was left with 21 cents in the bank when he got divorced. And he didn't have it in him to do anything. And so this happens to men and women. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, look, I don't care if you're left with 21 cents. And if that's what you decide, at least know what your rights are so that you know what, I'm okay with that, but to just, and then years later go, oh my gosh, I had no idea. That's so hard for me to hear that. Right. And then you hear these people going, oh, I'm now 5 years down the road and I should have asked for more money to help the kids. So yeah, it's, so what would you say would be one of the most important things for somebody to do while they're going through this divorce? I mean, I know they could get their finances together and things like that, but maybe the way that they're being, how can they be to get the best results?
Oh, I have a prescription for people, and it usually starts with having a healthy lifestyle. I advise people strongly, like quit drinking and start going to the gym and see what happens over the next 2 weeks. I bet you'll start thinking about this whole situation a lot clearer. Without a doubt, you do. And the best example of that is actually the counterexample, where I start with a nice professional guy, and then because guys never follow the instructions, and then over the course of 6 months to a year, they get fat, their hair either falls out or goes gray. The stress of it all eats them alive inside until they finally sign something with a big puffy red face. And they'd be like, I don't even want to sign this. I'm like, I know you don't, but you're doing it anyways. I'm advising you not to. And if they had just, focused on themselves and having a healthy lifestyle while they're going through this challenge, which is clearly the advice you'd give to anybody if they were going through any sort of crisis. What if your dad had cancer? What would you say? Oh, make sure you drink a 6-pack every night. No, you'd be like, take care of yourself because you've got responsibilities.
You know what, Russell? I actually say the first thing is self-care is your number one priority, because you're never gonna. It will eat you alive in a divorce, whether you're in the court or not. Self-care is so important. We talk about that a lot on this show.
Women do a great job of it. Ladies should be proud of themselves. They really do a great job.
Well, I think in general we're a little bit more selfish that way. Like we feel guilty for being that way, but I knew for me, I couldn't do it without. Every time I went to a hearing, 21 hearings, every time I prepared myself in the morning, I'd turn my phone off. I'd go walk on the beach. I'd go jump in the ocean. I would do meditation. I would, I told people don't call me because I set up my little support group and went through the meditation and all of the visualizations, because it is a lot. It's just a lot. And that's one of the reasons why it's called Divorcing Strong, is how can you be strong during this process? That's very, very difficult. Actually, I have to have a question for you, is how often do you find yourself counseling on the emotional side for people that are going through divorce?
If you need a divorce lawyer to counsel you, I'm probably not the right guy.
Yeah.
If you want results to be handled confidently, I probably am the right guy. If you want to have a beer or something after you're divorced, call me up. We're nearby. But during it, I'm not the right guy for that. I'm here to make a goal happen, to get you to the next chapter of your life with your sanity, your kids, and as much of your money as possible. Exactly.
And I think that that's an important point to let people know, is this, I wasted $365 or whatever it was the first time I met with an attorney, and just cried my eyes out and told them every sob story in the world. And that was the last time I did that. I didn't do that again. I mean, and sometimes, do you ever find that people feel like attorneys are, I shouldn't say heartless, but they're very matter of fact, right? But that's what they need. You need facts. You need the information. They don't need all the emotional stuff when you go to
facts have to come first. You can take the facts, and then if you go to trial and you say, and it's not simply like you go down a list like, Judge, they did this, they did this, they did this.
Right.
You can bleed in the courtroom. You can show your client's story and the dignity that they deserve that was denied by that other person. But you got to present the facts first.
Right.
So I think it's not so much that lawyers are heartless. It's more of an order of operations. Give us the facts first, and then tell us how the facts affect you. And then I'm going to take that package of facts and the effects, and I'll present it to the judge in a way that isn't an hour of crying, but rather a 30-second little speech that gets to the point.
Absolutely. And that's the reason why people hire you, because that's what you're masterful. It sounds like that is what you're masterful at, is taking all of that. And really that's something I want people really to understand, is that lawyers are not there to emotionally support you. And I also say that divorce lawyers have lives too, and if you can get to the point where it's just the facts, then they can do the best job that they possibly can for you and get you through it as quickly as you can, because it will cost a lot of money. Believe me, that was one of my mistakes I made at the very, very beginning. So any last words that you'd like to share with anyone, or that you feel like would be really important for somebody navigating that legal system while they're going through a divorce?
Don't be sad or worried because you're afraid. It's a scary situation. It's awful. It's a big empty courtroom where you don't know anybody, and they're going to decide your whole life. And so you have every right to be afraid of walking in there. But if you walk in with somebody who knows what they're doing,
Yeah.
knows the parties involved, and knows what the results should look like, it's going to get a lot less scary real fast.
Yeah. So they build the confidence in having someone like you on their team.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And thank you so much for everything that you do. I really, I know this is not an easy profession. And I say that all the time. I was at a conference for divorce attorneys, and I was mentioning that attorneys have lives too. And this one lady's like, yes, we finally have a voice, like somebody sees us, And I tell people that all the time. If they're working with the divorce attorneys, it's like, look, they go home, they have families, they have kids and things like that. They're doing the best that they can for you. And so working with an attorney is really important. So thank you so much for everything you do and being willing to spend time with us today and share your wisdom with us.
Of course.
Hang in just for 1 second. I'll just be right back. Hold on. So everybody, thank you so much for joining today's podcast for Divorcing Strong. I've been your host, Becky Sampson, and every week we provide you with different stories and legal advice, or not legal advice, but just the legal system on how to navigate divorce. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll talk to you soon.